You have some new developments from your perspective. Why don't you share them with us, please?
Well, in addition to the uncle who's been speaking here just outside of Washington, which has been riveting, of course, we've learned a lot from that conversation, what he's told reporters outside his home in Montgomery Village, Maryland. We've also been watching the White House, where, of course, was a scheduled White House briefing, as there normally would be on a Friday. That's been delayed for the moment, and we have been watching the president's national security team slowly arrive at the White House. We saw John Brennan, the head of the CIA, the Secretary of State John Kerry, as well as Chuck Hagel, the Secretary of Defense, arrive at the White House. But what we're being told by a White House aide is that was for a previously scheduled meeting of the president's national security principles, not in reaction to the news of the day. You can imagine they're probably still discussing it, but the word we're getting from the White House, this is not as a result of what's playing out in Boston. So something to bear in mind. And again, we're seeing some pictures of John Kerry arriving a short time ago and some of the other principals. But again, just picking up on what you all were talking about in terms of the uncle and his comments here, again, he acknowledged he hadn't had a lot of contact with the two boys recently, talked about his own brother and how ashamed he was about what has played out. And perhaps the most emotional part of his comments was his pitch to the suspect, the remaining suspect, to turn himself in and to ask for forgiveness from the victims. Let's hear a little bit from Ruslan Sarny, again, the uncle of the two suspects in the Boston Marathon bombings, speaking just a short time ago outside Washington.
We've not been in touch with that family for a number of years. Pardon me?
Did they live here?
No, they never lived here. They never lived here.
When's the last time you saw them?
Last time I saw them was 2006.
And again, in reference, we believe, talking about his brother, who he said earlier remains in Russia, the father of the two suspects, and again, acknowledging he hasn't had a lot of contact with the boys since they've been in the United States. And also, importantly, as we heard from Richard Falkenrath in the last hour, told us that they'd been born perhaps in Kyrgyzstan, but also spent time in the Republic of Dagestan, both areas that have seen, again, some ethnic tensions and again, spillover from what we've seen in Chechnya. But the boys, he said, have never spent time in Chechnya, although they are from an ethnic Chechen family. So some of the details we're learning from this uncle, Ruslan Sarny, speaking emotionally outside of Washington earlier.
And following those details, Peter, we have heard that Russian President Vladimir Putin was also briefed on the U.S. investigation into these suspects behind the Boston Marathon. Is there any word about conversations between President Obama and Putin?
Not that I'm aware of at this point. Obviously, that's something we would hear from the White House or perhaps also the State Department, and we'll be interested to see what we hear from the White House briefing, assuming we do have a White House briefing today. It's a fluid situation. Undoubtedly, they want to make sure everything, they have all the information they need before they step in front of the camera, so it may be some time, but we have not heard any confirmation of the president having that kind of conversation at that level with anyone in Russia.
And to be clear, understandably so, Peter, we have no idea what the motivation was for this bombing. So to make the leap that there might be some linkage with a connection in Chechnya would simply be inappropriate. You can understand why the White House is choosing to go very gently, as are we all, Peter.
That's right. And you heard the uncle, again, at least from his perspective, he thought this had absolutely nothing to do with Chechnya, had nothing to do with religion and religious issues. Again, we'll have to wait and see what the motivations were. He hasn't had contact with them recently. We don't know what's happened in the interim period. What have they been doing without his knowledge? So we'll have to wait for more information from the folks in Boston, the law enforcement officials there, and maybe we'll learn more from the White House and from agencies here as they come to the cameras. We hope, or we expect, at some point during the course of the day.